Citroen Car Club's Hydropneumatics Demystified, or subtitled, Why Does That Funny Car Go Up and Down? Widely known that these do indeed go up and down, but that's a side effect. The question is, why? Now, if I said infinitely rising rate suspension, would you know what I was talking about? I suspect possibly not. I can see heads shaking. Good. Effectively, if you have a steel spring, either a leaf spring or a coil spring or a torsion bar, and you put a load on it, it deflects by a certain amount. Double the load and you will double the deflection. The spring rate is linear. Gas does not work like that. Gas, on the other hand, the more you compress it, the firmer it gets, because you can't compress gas into nothing. Therefore, if you can use gas as a springing medium, the suspension starts soft and stiffens up, which is what Citroen did using these. Now, this is a suspension sphere. Half of this is full of high pressure nitrogen at about 900 psi. The other half, separated from the nitrogen by a neoprene diaphragm, which you can see here, is filled with hydraulic fluid, LHM. Now, the object of the LHM is to transfer the load of the suspension to the gas. If you look at the diagram, as they say, here's one I prepared earlier, you have the gas in the sphere here. You have the LHM below it. Now, to connect it to the suspension, you have a piston and cylinder arrangement as seen there. This is all very well, but you're always going to get some leakage past the piston. Citroen decided that rather than trying to seal the system in the manner of the much later Leyland Hydrogas, that they would have a tank, a hydraulic pump, a reserve of high pressure fluid feeding the suspension, and any return that leaked back beyond the piston into the gator would go back to the tank. So you've then created a live hydraulic system which circulates. And once you have that, you can use it for other things. So that in 1955, the DS had not only hydropneumatic suspension, but also power steering, full power brakes, not just power assisted, but also power clutch and gear change, that's to say hydraulic control of a manual box and clutch. So no power losses in the transmission, but no clutch pedal either. So that is the reason for using gas. That is the reason for the oil being present. The way that this is controlled for the suspension is using one of these. That's a height corrector. Now, effectively, it's a small store valve. Move the control at this end one way, and the fluid is allowed in, the other way, and it goes out. If we now look at the car, you can, I hope, see that we have a suspension sphere there, a suspension cylinder, and then the height corrector there. So these are the bits actually on the vehicle. Now, aided by my beautiful assistant Guido, he is going to, having started the car, lift it up to the full height. At the moment, it is at rest. Now, there are 3 normal heights for road use and 1 jacking height, which is the maximum which we are about to see. There's a height corrector like that at either end of the car. The system isn't interconnected front to rear, so don't think of, for instance, hydroelastic as if those are interconnected. They're quite separate, so you'll see that one end of the car will probably rise before the other. There's a delay on each so that they don't respond to every bump in the road. The height corrector is linked to the anti-roll bar at each end of the car, so that when the car is loaded and the anti-roll bar rotates, it actuates the height corrector accordingly to raise or lower the car. What Guido is doing at present is to override the automatic control manually to lift it to its full height. Now this is the method of changing a wheel on a D. Normally they come with a metal stand, but in deference to not destroying the NEC hall floor, we use wooden blocks. Okay, Guido, lower down please. Now he's lowering the car fully. The right hand side will go completely down, but the left hand side cannot because it's supported by the blocks. So pardon me, you will see something unusual happening in a moment. Namely, it picks both of the wheels off the floor. So you have the world's only self-jacking car, which is very handy for wheel changing. As you can see, it is completely off the floor. Right, so that allows wheel changing. The reason that has happened, of course, is because the right-hand side is fully low, and the anti-roll bars are therefore picking up the left-hand wheels because the car body can't descend. Right, Guido, if you would go back onto, well no, go onto intermediate if you would. Guido, intermediate? Yep. I can show the action of this height corrector by moving, if I move the lever one way, you'll see the wheel go down. So that's going up. And if I move it the other way, it goes down, which proves the function of the valve. It's as simple as that. Right, full height please. We'll now remove the blocks, and I shall get my other assistant in a moment to demonstrate the self-leveling action by loading the car. Blocks are not out yet. Ben, can we borrow you for purposes of ballast? As you see, I have an inexhaustible supply of beautiful assistants. Right, normal height, Guido. So the car's now being allowed to descend to its normal ride height. As I said, there is a delay in the system. It doesn't react instantaneously. Normal height. Right, okay, the car is now at normal height. Ben has now applied a load and the car has gone down as a result. You see it is now picking itself back up again because in applying the load it's twisted the anti-roll bar, opened the valve, and the car rises to normal ride height and stays there. Ben now gets off the boot, the car waits a moment and will then settle back down to exactly the same position because the load's been removed. So you have true automatic self-leveling. Now that's essentially all there is to it. Later on, Citroen applied the system to the GS of 1970 onwards, which, although it doesn't have power steering or power gear change, has the same brakes and the same suspension system as the DS, but in the mid-market. In other words, bringing this level of sophistication to the Escort, Viva, Avenger class for the same price. Later on, in the late 80s, they brought out the XM, as seen over on the far side, where using electronics, because these cars are purely hydro-mechanical, no electronics, no electrics involved in the suspension at all, but with those, using electronics and sensing linked to steering, brakes, and every other facet of the car, motion sensing, if you will, they would valve in an additional suspension sphere on each axle, which allowed the suspension to be either softer for general driving or firmer on cornering, so that you got the best of both worlds. That was known as Hydropneumatics. Now, at this stage, you're probably thinking, if this is such a wonderful system and it works so well, which it is and it does, why do they no longer use it? And the answer is that in the 70s, this was used on half a dozen production models, plus very specialist applications such as rear axle of Citroen ambulances in France to provide the soft ride. However, by around 2015, it was restricted to just one model, the C5, which was also available on steel coil springs, and production numbers didn't make it worthwhile to continue. So sadly, PSA dropped it, and you are now all doomed, I'm afraid, to travel on coil springs. It's a shame. Bear in mind the system and elements of it were licensed by Rolls-Royce, who are not known for licensing things that they can't design better themselves, but it is now history. However, the legacy lives on. They're known for it, and as I say, it works as well now as it did when it was designed over 70 years ago. If you have any questions, please ask. Other than that, thank you for your attendance. That's the push rod that actuates it with the gator and its return pipe. That links in directly to the suspension. Sphere would go on this end, and the high pressure feed into the system is there.